This is Christian again with another episode of Sent, and I get to interview PJ Bostic, the great drummer of my time. When I was in college, first time I got to meet Paul was when he was in the band Grammatrain, and I had nowhere to go that night, and he actually let me crash on his floor, and I got to see his heart, and so I'm so excited to be interviewing PJ today and getting to hear more of his heart and his ministry. So, as I do with everybody, Paul, can you give us your testimony and how you came to
The,
Christ?
the testimony, wow. Well, I'm one of those guys that I didn't have this. I mean, I've had moments in my life where I flipped a switch and went to another level, like I was convicted. I was like, okay, I'm quitting secular music. I'm gonna play Christian music. Or, like almost 20 years ago, I was touring with secular bands and I saw myself drifting away from God. And I guess I could even say backsliding. Didn't like looking at myself in the mirror, and I flipped the switch. I was like, okay, I had to make a choice. Like, hey, who am I going to be? I was spending too much time away from my brothers in Christ, and it was like, 3 or 4 years, just little drops of just get more distant from God and more distant, and then suddenly I would say something on the bus, and the bass player would say, "Wow, that came out of the Christian, the only Christian on the bus, like that came out of his mouth," and it hurt because he was right. So I've had these moments where I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm not, I'm gonna get my act together. But I grew up in kind of a lukewarm Catholic environment, religious sort of. My grandma and my mom did a really good job at really planting the seeds and the rock, and even if my relationship with God wasn't necessarily healthy when I was younger, it was sort of this, I thought God was this giant thumb that was going to crush me. And I'm not saying that's what Catholics believe. I'm just saying, I went to church. I didn't understand anything. I was a little uncomfortable with some of the artwork as a child, and um, but I never understood anything. And my parents, I think, just kind of made me feel like, uh, God was going to crush me. But when I was a teenager, about 13, 12, 13, 14, we moved next to the Rasmussens, and they loved God and they had a relationship with God. And I always wanted this relationship with God. Like I wanted to know God deep down in my heart. Like I just didn't know how to find him or how to, you know, have that relationship. And I remember it was when Mrs. Rasmussen said something about God speaking to her. And she just meant in her spirit, not verbally. But I was like, wait, what? God speaks to you? And she said, yeah, and she kind of talked me through some of that stuff. And I just wanted that. I was like, I want God to speak to me, like I didn't know you could have a relationship with God. I thought it was this thing you did, like you went to church and you check the box and then you go home and you try to be good. And if you're not, you go to hell. And I wasn't. So I was, going to hell. And so even though I really wasn't a very good Christian as I was figuring this out, it took me a long, long time, one foot in the world and one foot in my Christianity. To some extent, even when I was in some of the Christian bands I was in, just trying to figure it out. I was a Christian. I read my Bible a lot and I prayed, but I didn't even know what the difference between, I thought Protestant was like another denomination. Like, oh, well, there's Catholics and there's Protestants and there's Lutherans and there's, Baptists and, so much that I had to learn. And that this kind of comes around to, you know, after I had been in Grammatrain, after I had done some of these other things and touring in secular bands, and I started to drift, and then I went, okay, I'm going to find out where this Bible came from. I want to study Christian history. I want to understand theology. I want to know why I believe what I believe. And so for the last 15, 20 years, I've been on this road of just rediscovering this God that I serve, on a whole another level, to the point to where it makes me sad. I feel like I squandered my years in
Mm.
grammatrain to some extent. I was doing the best I could with what I had. I was a facilitator in Bloodgood and grammatrain and all these bands. I felt like I was facilitating the front man like a secretary facilitates the church. They're the preacher. I'm here to do my job so that they can do theirs. And I became a Christian. I was a musician first, and it felt like, well, what do I do now? Well, I give my gift to the Lord.
Mm.
And this is where we see a lot of um, responsibility is put on Christian. Like we expect way too much from Christian musicians. Like the fact is, I know this is a bad word. We're Christian entertainers. We're more than that, but we're not most of us aren't qualified to be teachers and pastors. We just have a gift. We become a Christian. We want to give it to the Lord. And sadly, that puts us in this spotlight where people expect us to be a certain thing and we can't always live up to it. And I wish I had known back when I was in grammatrain what I knew now. I feel like I would have been so much more useful to God. But at the same time, God's got his plan. He's doing what he's doing. That was all part of my growing process to where I'm at now. Right now, I really have a burden for the church. I used to think if you were, sorry, I know I'm being a little long-winded here.
No, no, that's just
Um,
fine.
I know a lot of people think if you're playing churches, you're preaching to the choir. That's what I always heard in grammatrain. And, you're preaching to the choir if you're playing churches and Christian places. And we wanted to play more secular places. But I don't believe that at all anymore. I think the church needs to be encouraged. The church needs to know that you're not alone with whatever it is that you're going through, and they need our testimony of when we weren't so close to God and we bounced back. Even, with politics where they are, like people need to know that they're not alone. And so my burden is and there's a lot of weird teaching going around. You and I were talking earlier. There's a lot of
Yeah.
strange teachings going around, and we need people that are pointing people to the scriptures and not to men to find out what they should believe. You know, that's kind of a long-winded testimony,
No,
I
no,
guess.
yeah, it's a great entrance, and frankly, it's changing where I'm going to go with the this interview because I, uh, growing up in especially in my college years, I went to a lot of concerts, got to know a lot of bands, and many of those bands are no longer serving the Lord.
Yeah, yeah.
Where do you see the downfall of the Generation X Christian bands? Did we push them too much to the front, or did we not give them enough resources? Was there not enough ministry behind them? Why do you think that occurred?
I have a couple thoughts on that. First, I've got to get my Mike Winger impression out of the way here.
Okay, go for it.
All right. That's for Mike Winger. He'll never see this, but that's for him. All right. Well, I've thought a lot about this, and ultimately I don't know. But possibly, I think part of it is what I was talking about. There was this boom of all these kids, young adults, becoming rock stars, Christian rock stars, if you will, whether big or small. We're on a stage and we're playing. And most of us weren't ready to be thrown in that spotlight and to be serving God with the kind of temptations that come along with being in a band. And as far as the people that have recanted their faith and the kind of people, I would like to know statistically if the amount of Christians that recant their faith, let's say if you just took all of Christendom, how many of them recant their faith? Let's just say it's 10%. And then you look at Christian musicians, maybe that's 10% too. Maybe it's just, but we it hits us harder because we don't, it hurts more kind of when we see it.
Yeah.
Just like when it's somebody in your family, somebody you really care about and you love, it hits you a little harder. And so think about how many people who have said they have family members that have recanted their faith, a kid or a brother or an aunt or something, you know? You hear a lot of that. And but when you're in the spotlight, everybody's going to hear about it. Everyone's going to talk about it. And it's just more shocking, I think. And to me, I even when like I said, when I was in grammatrain, and I'm still trying to figure things out, there's 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 nothing that could have there's no way that anybody could have treated me that would have made me recant my faith. Even the garbage I went through in high school, I wrote a song about this. I was treated really poorly. I was treated like garbage. People lied about me and gossiped about me, fought me in youth group, in a high school youth group.
Mm.
And they just treated me like crap. But I could still see the difference between, okay, these are lame Christians treating me like garbage, and this has nothing to do with God. Where some of the people that recant, they kind of blame Christians, like, oh, well, Christians are just phony or this and that. I don't really buy that. Sometimes I think maybe they meant well. They grew up in a Christian home. A lot of them are pastors' kids, and they just grew up and fell away from the Lord for reasons we just can't understand, you know. But it is hard to see, and it's more shocking when it's a leader of a Christian band. And so I think we talk about it more, and we tend to see that more. And I caught myself doing this after years of touring in the Christian music industry. I came out of it thinking Christians are this and Christians are that. And it took me a while to go back to church, even though I knew I needed to be in church. But what I realized is that I met thousands of people, and most of them were really good people, even some of the kooky ones,
Hmm.
But the people that hurt me, or you know, um, people that lied to me or hurt me or whatever, those are the people that stand out because it's so shocking that your brother in Christ would lie to you or deceive you or gossip about you or hurt you or whatever. And so I left remembering all my hurt and my pain. And I just put that on Christians. And it took a while for me to realize that I was kind of just deceiving myself in that way, that most of the people were actually really good people. And that's in the church too. Most of the people in your church are really good people. If the pastor hurts you or the worship leader, if there's a couple people that hurt you, you can leave that church with this like, oh yeah, that church is a bad church and those people, hurt me and they did this and they're. But we got to stop doing that.
Yeah. I think what it is people don't know how to approach somebody and actually have a spiritual conversation with somebody that's hurt them. We're
Hmm.
supposed to go for forgiveness. And I think too often we go to bitterness.
Yeah.
Earlier, we were talking about One Bad Pig. And for me, that's one of the great Christian punk bands of all time. And you actually got to
Yeah.
produce and drum for them. Tell us about that experience.
Well, I'll back up to this is kind of a funny story. When I first joined Bloodgood and we were playing a festival and I was still new, I was excited to be in this band that I used to listen to Bloodgood and I'd go see their shows and they had an effect on me. Their ministry did. Me and the band Paragon that I was in at the time.
Well,
And
I just want to quickly say, uh, Michael Bloodgood, who passed away not that long ago, we miss him because he was a true uh,
he was,
minister. He was a pastor. He was all about Jesus. So, if his wife watches this, I was a friend of Michael's.
mm,
Uh, we just want to thank his wife for all that she did and the rest of the band did because that was excellent ministry. And that's what a
yeah.
privilege that you got to play with them.
Yeah, and Marilyn is gold too. Mike and Marilyn. I mean, everybody in the band was really great. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
they were
liked
all
Michael,
ministers.
man.
They're,
Yeah.
they're, they're the true Christian band.
Yeah, they were a good example for me, being out with them and just seeing, uh, in fact, that's probably one of the things that made me feel like more of a facilitator. Like Mike Bloodgood, he's okay. I want to preach the gospel. How can I do this? I'm going to grab a guitar. Where I'm like, okay, I play an instrument and now I'm a Christian. What do I do? Okay, I guess I'll go be a Christian musician and work it out. So, and I always looked at Michael and I thought so much of him in his passion for preaching the gospel, him and Les, that I almost felt like there was something wrong with me. You know, like I'm a little shyer, I guess. I'm not as outgoing and um so yeah, man, they're legit, totally legit. So anyway, we were playing at this festival and I was sitting at the table with Bloodgood and across from us we're sitting with One Bad Pig because they're playing the same festival and I had a lot of respect for those guys, but I'm not really a punk rocker, so I didn't listen to their music. I'd heard it and I knew who they were, and I'd seen them play live and thought they were cool, you know. And so I just thought it was cool. I was sitting across from this band, like, you know, they have a record deal and they're signed, and I'm in Bloodgood now, and I'm hanging out with celebs, you know. I just thought I was neat, and so then that was that, and then I moved to Texas, and I don't know how I ended up getting in touch. Somehow I developed a friendship with Daniel and Lee, and one day, you know, we were friends. One day they called me, the pig called me, and they were conferencing me on the phone, and they said, "Hey, you know, our drummer um, is is not up for doing these shows or whatever it was that was going on," and asked if I'd be willing to do some shows. And you know, I can't remember if we talked about an album yet at that point, but you know, if you had asked me the day before if I would ever play for One Bad Pig, I probably would have said no because it's just musically not my go-to. But that conversation, I'm just being honest, like God, I don't say this very often and I don't say this lightly. He just put it on my heart like yeah, yeah, I need to do this. That's how I felt with Bloodgood too. Like God spoke to me and I even told my wife, like I knew that I was going to get that gig. I just felt so right about it. And I just knew that that was gonna I was gonna get that gig. And not because of how good I was or anything, but it just felt so right. And sometimes that happens in my life where something just feels too right. There's so much peace there, and I've prayed about it, and I just somehow I just know, and I believe that was God. So that was the thing with One Bad Pig too. It just felt so right, and that was all confirmed by everything that happened after that. I loved playing with those guys. It was so much fun, and then I think we did talk about doing a record either later in the conversation or after that, but we did the record, and it was a blast. I believe it's an excellent record. I stand by it, and went to Europe with those guys and played some shows around here and stuff. And it was a really great chapter in my life. And those guys are legit. You know, they love the Lord. They're about ministry. And so I've been lucky that the bands I've been associated with, you know, with Triton and Bloodgood and One Bad Pig, just being with with pastors, you know, just people that are there's pastors in all of those bands that have a heart for ministry. It was just good for me to be around people like that.
Paul, um, you had opportunities also to do some production and leading worship. What's been your out of everything you've been a part of? What has been the most rewarding ministry you've been a part of?
Most rewarding, huh? That's a tough one. I don't know that I have an answer because there's so many different angles on that. Bloodgood was the biggest ministry. Like I saw the most people come to Christ in Bloodgood. But on a personal level, I was in someone else's band, sort of, you know. I didn't start that band. I wasn't an original member. Grammatrain was special because I co-founded that band and we had a different kind of ministry, and I still stand by the things that Pete said, and he meant them when he said them. When the grammatrain had a pretty important ministry, I believe, regardless
Sure.
of where Pete's at now. He would even say he believed everything he said, he meant it. Um, and of course, Triton. I only did a couple of shows with Triton, but Larry, that he's like a little John the Baptist. The guy is so over the top for Jesus in a good way. He's just so much energy, just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it's Jesus, Jesus. How can we reach more people and just preaching the gospel? And he goes. I don't know where he gets his energy. And the PJ Bostic stuff is special to me because I'm so involved in everything. I'm playing all the instruments, I'm producing and recording it all, and I have something to say. And I do believe that some of the things I have to say are unique to the environment of Christian metal rock in general. And people tend to really appreciate some of the things I have to share. But I haven't played out a lot. That's one of the reasons I'm playing out again, is because I can only do so much making records and putting them out there. And I have more to say. And if I don't get out there and play and get in front of people, I'm not gonna, I just feel like I'm not doing enough. So it's more of an opportunity for me to share my heart as much as I can and change people's lives. So it's really hard to say. There's different ways that every one of those projects was special to me, you know.
All right. Now you've also been doing worship ministry.
Yeah.
Now, being a pastor myself, I know that's not always the easiest thing. Uh,
No, we're easy though at my church. I've been a drummer in worship bands forever. And this was the first time, they found out I could play guitar and sing, and they're like, you need to, we need you to step up and, lead some worship. And I always thought if you were going to be a worship leader, that had to be a calling.
hmm.
Maybe it does to some extent, but it had to be like God's calling me to be a worship leader, to get up front and to lead worship. At Hope Rock, where I go to church here in Lakeway, for me, it was more of I just am here for whatever they need. Thank God they haven't asked me to, you know, clean the toilets and stuff, because I would do that. I don't tell them, but I'm there to do whatever they need me to do. And so when they asked me to do that, I was really nervous about it. I really wasn't super comfortable with it, but I was comfortable with serving Hope Rock, and that's what they needed me to do. And over time, I've gotten more comfortable with it, and it's been good for me. It's been good for Hope Rock, and so they just move me around now. Bass or drums. Sometimes I run sound. Sometimes I'm leading worship, and I've grown through it as well. And I'm getting comfortable enough now that I find these moments, because as a worship leader, guitar is my second instrument, so I'm not quite as comfortable. So I have to concentrate a little harder on singing the right notes and playing the right chords. And it can take away from my ability to actually worship myself. And so I have to look for moments in the songs that I can grab. There will be a lyric that really speaks to me. And so in rehearsal, I find that those lyrics, and, even just here in the studio when I'm practicing, um, those lyrics dig in and mean something. And so when I play on Sunday and they just naturally pop up and I go there, it's like, oh yeah, this is that place where I can play the song easy enough and I can have my own little moment here. And the rest of the time, I'm just trying not to blow it. I know it's not a performance and you don't have to play it
Yeah.
perfectly, but
Well,
we're pretty laid back and,
there was something that Cliffy Huntington said in an interview I had with him, and he said leading worship's difficult for him because he's so used to being the rock star, and that's the last thing you want up leading worship.
yeah.
And so having the struggle, I think, is actually a good thing because then you're
Mhm.
not focused in on being the star.
Yeah, and I never felt that way as a guitar player anyway. Just as a drummer, you're hiding back there and it's physical anyway, you're cutting loose. And as a worship leader, I used to sort of tame myself because if music's going, my head just wants to move. I'm a very like I want to move to the music, and I would restrain myself. Not that I'm going to be headbanging, but I'm more comfortable now enjoying while I'm playing. But the first time I did a PJ Bostic show there, they had me play for my album release party in May. I didn't, like I said, I didn't think I'd ever play live again, but one of the elders there kind of talked me into doing this. And I remember being on that stage, and now I am playing in a rock band, and I couldn't help but to restrain myself because this is the stage I lead worship on. And
Mhm.
this is like a lot of my church people, and it just felt strange to be in, I'll just humbly say rock star mode. I'm not a rock star, I'm a musician. But that will not be the case in October. We're playing there in October 6th. We're playing there again. And I'm going to have fun. I'm going to cut loose, and we're having fun. The band's having a lot of fun in here. And I got Manny Morales from Deliverance playing bass for me now.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's killing it. He's a shredder. He's the shredder in the band. I have a guitar player that plays with me too, and we play, but we're not shredders. But this guy, he's the shredder in the band. And both of the guys that I'm in the band with just have a really tremendous heart for the Lord, and they're bros. And once again, I've surrounded myself with good people, so it's a really good thing I have going on right now.
Well, behind you, I can see your drum kit, and it
Yeah.
looks incredible. Uh, I just got to know: do you normally set up with that many cymbals?
Oh, for the PJ Bostic stuff. Yeah, this kit doesn't really go anywhere. It went to a photo shoot once, but this kit stays here in the studio. I have
Okay.
other kits for gigging and stuff like that. But yeah, this is my big giant, I don't know if I can move this around. You'll kind of see some of it over there.
Woo.
See some of it over there. Yeah, it's a big old kit. Everything on that kit, just like any other kit, I didn't go get a big kit because I want to go. Everything I bought. I'm a man of very limited means. So if I spent a bunch of money on a drum, it's because I heard it in my mind's ear and I wanted it for like a song, like a direction I'm going in with my music. I just wanted it on the kit, and so I found a way to get it. And so everything on that kit has a purpose, and it's set up ambidextrous so I can lead with my left hand or my right hand, and you can't really see it, but the kick is in the middle, between my feet, and I have a kind of a unique pedal that um, so it's not like I have a right bass drum with a slave. I have two slaves that go to a center kick drum, and it's just was my vision, and I'm a creative person, and if I'm writing for my stuff, or some people are hiring me to do some of the more progressive rock kind of stuff, they like hearing all the different instruments, and they like hearing the different directions I can go with the music. But usually if I'm just recording a rock song for somebody, I'm just using a couple of my toms, a couple of my
Okay.
cymbals, and just grooving it out.
Well, that leads to the next question. Who are your three favorite drummers of all time?
Okay,
Who
well,
are
the
your influences?
the biggest one's easy. Neil Peart is my biggest influence. He's the most overestimated and underestimated drummer in the world.
Mm,
There's people that say that he's, a drum god and nobody's better than he is. And if you're just talking about technique and chops and stuff, that's certainly not true. There's guys that have more chops than Neil Peart. Um, his gold is his thought and his power. He just has a very unique power, the way that he hits his drums and the way that he just so consistently gets the volume he gets out of his drums, and his mind. He's not a super like an ad lib kind of guy. He tells a story. He's one of the few people that can really tell a story with his drums. The one drum fill sets up the next one, and that one sets up the next one. And there's this story that he's telling underneath Getty and Alex's story. And and I tuned right into that. I got it as a kid. Even when I was 16, I saw that, I interpreted it, and I understood it. And so that's what I do now. So after Neil, it's hard to say because now we're just talking about groove drummers and chop drummers. Like, well, who has the chops or who has the groove? Matt Chamberlain's one of my favorite groove drummers. And then my favorite independence guy, of course, is Terry Bozzio. That guy's got crazy independence. And I was his drum tech for a few years, so I got to really get inside his head on some of that stuff. He's just amazing, an amazing talent. Steve Gadd, Dennis Chambers, Vinny Colaiuta, you
Ooh,
know,
yeah.
I love that, those kind of groove chop. I started to go in that direction pretty hardcore uh, just before I started getting serious about my guitar and doing the PJ Bostic stuff. And really, all the time I spent on guitar and writing has taken a lot away from the time I would have spent on the drums. So sometimes I'm kind of sad that I never really went as far as I wanted to with my drum training and just getting into the really intense Vinny Colaiuta kind of stuff. I do some of that kind of stuff, um, but I wouldn't trade it because I had to do that to be the guitar player that I want to be. I come out here and practice 5, 6 nights a week on my guitar, 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours a night. And the drums, they get like an hour or two every other day or something. I neglected them for a long time and I paid the price. I've done that so many times. I'll go months without playing them. And then I get back on, I'm trying to play and I've lost my strength. I'm getting shoulder pain and having all kinds of problems. I'm slow to getting it back right now because I've been hired to play on some albums and I've got to kind of get it back so that I can do that.
Yeah.
Uh, but I've neglected my drums, and I don't know if I would go as far as to say God spoke to me about this, but I did realize it. Um, God's really given me a gift on the drum set, and I kind of took it for granted by neglecting it. And there was just a month or two ago, and I say this with all humility, I realized how special the gift was that God had given me, and I just kind of squandered it by taking it for granted. And sure, I'm working on my guitar and stuff, but could still be out here on my drums a couple hours a day. And so I've changed all that. Now the first thing I do, I get up, I've got my little station over here where I study the word, and I've got all my books and my things. If I get confused, I try to figure it out as much as I can and understand what I'm reading. And then first thing I do is play my drums. I play my drums for an hour, 2 hours, and I work out, exercise a little bit, and then I do my guitar for 2, 3, 4 hours or whatever, and try to get all that done to get in time to see my family before I go to bed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's end with the interview with your favorite verse. What is your favorite Bible verse?
I'm gonna go to this one. Has carried me through some tough times. Boy, I used to know right where this. It's in Psalm. What is the? I used to be able to tell you right where it was, but we can find it later. I might get this order backwards. It says, "God heals our hearts and binds our wounds. He determined the number of the stars and calls them each by name."
Hmm.
And maybe that's not an accident that they were next to each other, because there's times where when we're hurting, it's so easy to feel like, and I say feel like, even though we know how powerful God is, we feel like either God's powerless to fix my situation or to heal me, or he just doesn't want to, or he doesn't see me. God doesn't see me right now. He's busy with more important people. And I'm just talking about how we feel. Even though up here we know, okay, I know God sees me. I know he's not ignoring me. I know he's not powerless, but we can't help but, like, this is how I feel right now. I'm hurting. And why won't God help me? I've been crying out, like, why am I still hurting? So right before that, I believe, or after that, he determines the number of stars and calls them each by name. And I remember pondering that scripture at a time in my life when I was in a lot of pain. I was really hurting. And I was looking at the stars, and I was just, how sometimes you're looking at the stars and pondering the universe and how vast it is and how many stars and just how big, and it
Absolutely.
just goes on. And I was like, the same God that created this universe, and I'm looking at the stars. That one has a name. That one has a name. He determined them all by name. That's the same God who, in that same sentence or right before or after it, said that he heals our hearts and binds up our wounds. Like the God that did that sees me, and that's the evidence that I can look at to trust God and know that He sees me. He's not ignoring me. He'll fix this in His good time, and He knows what's best for me. And sometimes the things that we have to go through are better for us, or they're just consequences, for they teach us lessons. So that has carried me through some tough times.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Paul. This has been an amazing time, and I hopefully I'll get to see you in concert and hang out with you again.
I hope so. Are you still up in Seattle?
I am no longer. I am in Arizona City, Arizona. I'm pastoring
Okay.
a church. So if you ever come this way, you've got a free place to stay, a swimming pool,
All right.
and a church to play in. So
Well, if you book us, we will come. I'm trying to. I have some other friends in the Arizona area and some people that want to see me. So, yeah, see you, my friend.